Hello my quilting friends! Leah Day here with a new collaboration video. My friend Luis Sanchez has sent me this beautiful quilt block, and as you can see I have already quilted it with two fun designs. So let's learn how to quilt this together. First I'm going to explain my design process and how I pick these designs, and then we're going to quilt it together step by step. So here is this beautiful block that Luis sent me, and I'm looking at this, and what I love is this really nice pinwheel effect. I just really like that, and I like how much movement it's creating with these kind of angles and triangles and that kind of thing. So I want to do something that's going to emphasize that, and what I'm thinking is squares, to kind of break this down and do squares that are on point that will emphasize those shapes. So I'm just going to grab a regular ruler, and I'm going to base this off of Luis's piecing. Whatever those lines are lining up to be, I'm going to just line up the ruler, and I think we're going to space these out to have lines every ½ inch apart. So I'm just going to line it up there. And so I'm marking this line a ½ inch from the seam line, because I really don't want it to land right dead in the seam line. I think it'll look better to have kind of maybe 3 lines evenly spaced right through here, and that will form a nice big square. This is just the idea I'm running with. You know, that's the thing. It's like once you start putting marks on the quilt, you know, and then it starts taking shape, then you can kind of start to play around and adjust. So I like the look of that. That looks really nice. So I'm going to go all the way around and mark it. And here's the good thing about marking. Number one, it's important to always test your marking pencil. And that's important because let's say I change my mind and I just decided, you know, I don't really like this anymore. You want to be able to erase those marks out completely if you decide that it's not going to work. You also want to be able to erase the marks completely just simply after the quilting is done and that quilting process is complete. So that way all that shows is your beautiful quilting design. You know, any kind of marked pattern is kind of the magic trick. You know, and a good magician never reveals his secrets. And it's funny, my son and my father-in-law are into magic tricks, and they're really good at it. And I'm always like, oh, show me how it works, show me how it works. And they're both like, no, we can't show you how it works because then you won't, you know, you'll just be kind of miffed that you're being tricked by something really simple. So it's always got to remain magical. And quilt marks are the same way. You know, you want it to be there, and then you want it to disappear completely, leaving just your beautiful quilting behind. So this is looking good. I really like that idea, and I can see that. It's going to create a nice channel through there. I think I'm going to fill the whole pinwheel with maybe a free motion quilting design. You know, a oldie goldie design that I really love is McTavishing. So I think I'll fill this pinwheel with McTavishing and do it with hot pink thread. So really stand out. And I had a lot of movement to that as well. And then I'll stitch these straight lines with more hot pink thread. I think I'll just do hot pink throughout. It'll end up blending in nicely with these areas, but it'll show up really boldly in these black spaces. I don't have really a good plan for what I'm going to do out here. I might just continue more straight lines, but I've pretty much got a game plan for what we're doing here. So let's get on the machine and get started quilting it. So I'm getting started, and I'm going to stitch in the ditch around that pinwheel shape in the center. And I'm just carefully stitching here right on that pink fabric. So Luis pressed this seam line, he pressed that to one side, to the black side, so that's really easy to stitch along. Now this seam line, I think I can feel it underneath the fabric. That's been pressed open. So as I stitch, I want to just be careful as I stitch right down the middle of that seam. You know, just slow and careful stitching. And I am using a really puffy batting. This is Quilter's Dream Puff, and it is super lofty. And I'm doing that because I really want certain elements to stand out and puff out nicely. And so it kind of it creates a real squishy feeling on the quilt. So if you see me mushing on it or smushing my hands down on it, that's because I'm just trying to control that batting a little bit and make sure that it's not causing any distortion on the block. So I can put my foot down just a little bit. I'm just trying to stay right in that ditch. I'm going to work my way all the way around the block, and then I'll start stitching some of those straight lines. And I'm going to continue using my walking foot for all of these lines. And the reason is it's just a little faster and a little easier to do that with walking foot style quilting. Of course, you could do this with free motion quilting. You could also do this stitching with ruler foot quilting. If you happen to have a ruler and a ruler foot on your machine, that would work too. One thing, it's real easy to get distracted, and I was almost about to start stitching that ditch, but that would be wrong. I want to be stitching the center shape in the ditch. So you always have to be paying attention to what's going on. This is such a cool block, and I was looking at the shapes. I think it's really going to be neat to see how Luis put it together. So make sure to check out his tutorial. He's going to be posting too and share how to piece this block. And he will be sharing that tutorial in English. So he usually shares Spanish tutorials. So I think he'll make an extra special one just for us. So here we go. A little bit more stitching here. Carefully staying on that line. And like I said, it's just a little bit of a squishy, puffy, puffy thing going on here with this particular block. But I think that's going to be really interesting, and certainly when I start filling inside here with McTavishing, that extra puff and loft is really going to add nice definition to the stitches. It's going to really make that design stand out nicely. So I'll work my way around, and I'll meet you back here when we're ready to start stitching more straight lines around. So I'm on my last little bit of stitching around that center shape, and I could break thread here and then start stitching my straight line squares around it, but that's a little fiddly for me, so I am just going to escape through the ditch instead. So I just stitched out through the ditch, and then now I'm lined up here on my mark line, and I can start stitching. And the nice thing is I actually have kind of a check for my line, whether I drew it accurately or not. There's a little mark here on my walking foot that is a 1/4 inch away from the needle. So if I line up that little mark on my walking foot with the seam line, basically with whatever seam line I'm stitching against, then I know I'm stitching exactly a 1/4 inch away. And I can make, you know, kind of like little fine movements, just slightly adjust where I'm stitching just to make sure that I'm staying in nice alignment with that piecing. And here I can tell I didn't stitch down far enough, so I'll just rotate back, take 1 or 2 more stitches. That looks good. Actually, that's a little overshot, so I'm going to back up a stitch. Some machines don't like it when you do that. Basically, I just rotated the hand wheel backwards, and that was able to pick up the last stitch and back up a little bit. Some machines just don't like that. You just kind of play with it and see what your machine can handle. But my machine will allow me to back up 1 stitch, and I sometimes exploit that feature quite a lot when I overstitch something. So now I'm just trying to stay either on that mark line or just kind of eyeballing my 1/4 inch mark on my walking foot, and I'm just working my way around. And I think I'm going to do the exact same thing when I come all the way around and start my second set of squares. I'm going to just escape through that ditch rather than break thread and have thread tails to tie off. I like the idea instead of just having that little escape hatch. It just makes it a little faster, a little easier. It wastes less thread to not have to break. But of course, there's no right or wrong way of doing it. That's the nice thing about quilting, is that, you know, if that is something that would bother you and you just wouldn't like that look, maybe on the back of your quilt that would bother you to see that stitching, you can always break thread and tie off those thread tails. It's not a big deal. So here I'm coming up on my start. You can see I can put my foot down just a little bit whenever I have a nice straightaway. I'm going to come right up to that ditch and then now rotate, and I'm just going to stitch down that ditch until I reach the next line. So this is where I'm saying, you know, you have 2 options. You could do this stitching in the ditch to come down, or you could break thread and tie off instead. Okay, so now we're going to get started going this way. I think I'm going to take 1 more stitch here, because it looks like if I'm lining up, I want now this 1/4 inch mark lined up with my stitching down here. I don't have anything to go off of right this second, but I will in just a second as I stitch down. When I reach this point right here, now I can start looking at that lining up that seam line so it lines up and I know I'm a 1/4 inch, again, from those seam lines going on this side of the foot. So it's really handy. Sometimes a walking foot is actually easier to quilt with. It's a better choice simply because of the spacing in the guides and the wonderful base that the walking foot is. You know, sometimes I will pick it and choose it simply because it's going to result in very nice, even, straight stitching, and I won't have to worry so much or, you know, really have to focus quite so hard on keeping everything straight and even or marking every single line. You know, I could probably have gotten away without even marking those marks from before. Mostly I was just kind of still thinking about what I wanted to do on the block. But you can see now, just using those guides on the walking foot, I'm generally able to knock this out. So this is how I'm going to continue quilting the straight lines in this block. I'm just going to work my way around it, escaping through that ditch. I'll meet you back here when I'm ready to knock out some McTavishing in that center pinwheel. So now I'm quilting McTavishing, and this is a really wonderful flowing design. Starts with a nice curving line, come to a point, and then just basically echo it all the way back down to your starting line or close to it, just like that. Now I'm going to travel stitch over right in the ditch, really carefully, and then now I'm going to come up with another echo. I'm going to bring this echo in, and then I'm going to hit up against that tip. So we're going to kind of build up thread right on that point. Then bounce against it and come back down again. You can see how this is just evenly spaced curving lines. In order to get out of this little weird area, I'm going to have to travel stitch right in the ditch, come down, and just stitch one more gently curving line right there. Rotate around, take a look, and you just have to kind of look at it and constantly be, you know, wondering, okay, well, what is the next best thing to stitch? And I think stitching one more curving line all the way down is a really good choice. Okay, so now I want to do just something a little bit more interesting. I think I'll curl back and forth here, a nice deep curve, and then when I come out of this area, so like right here, I can finally do a nice long curve that kind of matches in with all of those others. And let's actually turn that into a spiral. We'll go all the way back down, travel stitch along that other McTavishing shape, and swirl out and around to hit that tip again. So it's kind of like you're always aiming for that tip on one side and build up thread there, and then you're always keeping even spacing of your lines in the other side. And that kind of creates this effect of like cartoon hair. And then as I'm stitching too, I'm also trying to fill in all the little gaps, all the little weird areas with just more gently curving lines. That looks great. Swirl inside. And one thing I like to do is just do a little bit of travel stitching away from that tip. We've already done quite a little bit of thread build up there, and I think it always looks better to branch out with your next shape, not exactly from the tip of the McTavishing shape. And then you can curl into a spiral, a hook, whatever really feels good to end that line of stitching. Here I've come all the way back around. Careful travel stitching will get me out of this area. Maybe I'll put a little line right there. Come out. And it's really just the same thing as, you know, all echo quilting. It's just space estimation when it looks about right. I'm not going to take a ruler to it. Some of my lines might end up a little closer together or a little further apart, and that's okay. It's part of the organic nature of the design. You really want to just let it flow. There we go. So I'm just going to continue adding more McTavishing, these beautiful curling lines of quilting. I'm going to fill in this entire space, and then you can already see how I'm filling in these corners. And for this, I went on ahead and overlapped this little pink area too. I think that came out great. And here's what it looks like whenever I finished Luis's quilt block. So that's it for this video. I hope that you enjoyed learning how to quilt this beautiful block and you learned something new about machine quilting. Now you can learn how to piece this block from one of Luis's videos. He's going to make a special video in English just for you to learn how to make this. And you can find his YouTube channel. I'll link it up below this video so you can easily find it. So I hope that you've enjoyed learning how to quilt and piece this with us and that you enjoyed both tutorials provided for you today. If you have any questions, of course, please ask in the comments below. Both Luis and I love helping you learn more about quilting. And of course, if you like the videos, please like them, share them with your friends, and subscribe to both of our channels on YouTube so you don't miss any future tutorials. Until next time, let's go quilt!